Adam, thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
Oh, so great to be here with you, Robin.
I thought it would be fun to start because this is a different kind of podcast, perhaps, than many that I do, with how you and I often give context for how we know each other. We've been professional colleagues on and off now for 10 years, but I'm going to show a picture for folks watching. This is me in Little League in Sebastopol, California. And you and I go all the way back to soccer. How did you go from I don't have very many friends from middle school or earlier, right? I just have lost touch and for whatever reason, you and I reconnected 10 almost 15 years ago. Who were you in middle school? And in what ways, if any, and it might just be in contrast, does that relate to the work that you do today?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you and I met in elementary school, and then we played soccer in elementary and middle school, which is so special. In middle school, I remember I had a really solid group of about three friends. We were obsessed with Magic cards, Magic the Gathering. We sat at one little table, and in some ways, I felt like I had somewhat of a small world in reality. I was like all about like computer games and Magic the Gathering. But that was also a time in which I went through a pretty big transformation of going to this youth leadership camp, I think in like seventh or eighth grade, and coming back and really wanting to shift the way that I was orienting in the world towards playing guitar and going hiking and connecting with people on a deeper level and having a more diverse community. And so I think it was a big time of change for me. But ultimately, I think this idea of do I belong, fitting in, you know, um, wanting to be part of something bigger. And I think this is all tied into the work that I do now of like, how do we help people feel more connected to themselves and to others and to create space for them to drop some of the armor that people put up in schools and workplaces.
Super fun. I'm sure I've heard the story, but I don't know that I could tell the story of how late night art came to be, of the first time that you started doing this. And so to give listeners and viewers a little bit of context, if you'll tell the origin story behind the business that you run today.
Yeah, of course. There's many different ways I could tell it. But ultimately, I've been creating art since I was a little kid. I studied art in college. I went to this amazing leadership camp, as I described, starting at age 13, where I witnessed extraordinary facilitation and the use of different art modalities as a tool to help teenagers and adults connect with each other on a deeper level and discover their strengths and talents in the world. And so being part of that process, it was called the Power of Hope. That was the camp that I went to. That set the stage for me wanting to become a facilitator and wanting to use art, not necessarily just to become a better artist, but as a tool to connect people. And that really has been the thread of my life and my work. So ultimately, I became an AmeriCorps volunteer with that nonprofit organization. And while I was there, I did a 6 month course in facilitation, which is called The Heart of Facilitation. And my final project was a workshop that would eventually become the seeds of my business. So the seeds were planted when I was teaching art in a high school setting, and I was experimenting with music and having students build off each other's work and creating an environment that was truly free from judgment and comparison and recognizing that I could use music and having people build off each other's ideas as a way to let go of some of the things that get in the way. And yeah, all that culminated in this workshop that I built with a friend of mine named Julian, and he was also in this facilitation training. And so basically, we did that final project. We turned it into a party that we led in Julian's mom's living room in Vancouver, Canada in 2010. And that party had people who spoke five different languages. And I was facilitating using art supplies and curated music and these guided conversations and prompts that were helping people build off each other's ideas and see each other in a deeper way. And that evening was a really peak moment in my life. And I received a lot of incredible feedback from people saying this is very special. There's something magical about what you're doing. And people reflected back that they saw that there was a business concept here. There was something like rooted in what we were doing that was really unique. And so that was the beginning. And it kind of, there's many things that emerged from there, but that was the beginning. Late Nite Art was formed, and ultimately there became two chapters. There was Late Nite Art Vancouver and Late Nite Art Oakland.
Hmm.
And then Late Nite Art Amsterdam started. And in the very beginning, the business was more going to be like a TEDx Creative Mornings type model in which we had chapters around the world. But it was really focused as like a community building experience that would bring people together in a really unique way over an evening.
Yep.
And of course, it has evolved a lot from there.
Yeah. We'll go back to how you and I reconnected in the early days of our collaboration, but I wanted to sit down with you for a conversation today, in part because the world is accelerating so quickly. And one of the things that is at a deficit is trust among people working together, among especially knowledge work, people on screens. There's so much with AI, there's so much with the accelerating rate of change that trust and connection between real people is, there's an absence of that. My own journey, long before the work that I do today, before Responsive Conference or Xandr Media, most of how I've built trust in groups has been through athletics. We played soccer. I went on to be a runner, and then totally burnt out of those and started dance, both social and performance dance, gymnastics, acrobatics, circus. And it was really in training things like Brazilian jiu-jitsu or surfing right out on the waves at Ocean Beach outside of San Francisco, and the camaraderie that comes when somebody gets tumbled for 5 minutes under waves, and you know that those other surfers are out looking for you, or at least keeping track of you, right? Or when you have a group of people that you're, as an acrobat with the San Francisco Opera, they're literally putting their life in your hands and vice versa. And so I've always been interested in late night art because for me, my mom is a visual artist. For folks who can see the video, this is her work behind me. And art was always a solitary activity versus for me, athletics was a together activity. And so it's fascinating to me that you've created an environment that is art and music and facilitation that brings people together, that is not the domain I've played in, which is athletics, but instead it's creativity. What is the role of creativity in an hyper connected but also increasingly disconnected world?
Yes. I think that creativity is such a big word, and so is art. But when I talk about it, like in the context of the work that I do, people are sitting along long banquet tables covered in drawing paper with art supplies. I'm leading them through questions and prompts, getting them to tell stories and engage with each other, and then use their hands and have this tactile way of creating and then moving from chair to chair where they're building off each other's ideas. So I think in this world in which it's very screen focused and people are completely overwhelmed and multitasking and have so much information coming in, I really believe there's a need to let the dust settle for us to actually integrate our lives and our learning and what's happening. So one, getting off the screens is key. Getting people to pick up art supplies in their hands and actually create together, it just is such an interruption of the pattern of how people usually communicate and relate to
Yeah.
one another
Yep.
that there's a novelty there that really puts people on the same playing field. Like depending, some people might be have they're the CEO of the company and someone else just got hired last week. And so there's like a clear power differential. But when they're both drawing a story from the neighborhood that they grew up in that act, it really puts them on the same level. And then when they share and hear from each other, they are relating more as human beings as opposed to the CEO and the new hire. So it really is an effective way of cutting through the subtle power dynamics that are always at play and how people are relating
Or
to each
not so
other.
subtle. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Generally, they're not subtle at all. Yeah, it's like these two people would probably never have this kind of conversation. And so that's a big part of the work I do is being able to bring people back to the ground. And I think that creativity and different modalities of art are really effective in doing that.
You brought Late Nite Art before I knew what it was to Responsive Conference 2016, which is we're at 10 years of Responsive Conference. As we brought it to Responsive Conference back in the last couple of years post COVID, we've prioritized, you and I both, having a 2 hour late night art session the beginning of the second day of Responsive. And I consistently get feedback from attendees who make it, right? We I think 2 years ago we had 20 seats, then we had 40 seats. We'll still figure out what we're going to do this year, but it's a subset of our 300 attendees who can actually sit at these tables and experience the magic that you create. And it's a highlight of their conference, right? It's a peak experience for everybody who attends. What's your view on trust, especially as the Responsive Manifesto, which you and I both have known for a decade now, says the rate of change continues to accelerate and the future is increasingly hard to predict. What then happens is less trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
More immediate gratification, more Netflix and chill or scrolling X or panic hiring and panic firing, right? An absence of trust between employers and employees. What's the role of trust in your view and from your sort of unique outside perspective in building resilient organizations?
I know that one of the big challenges that a lot of organizations are facing right now is employees trusting leadership and not believing that leadership has what it takes to navigate through the next couple of years. So there's a lot of people who are just like scared for their job. And what I'm hearing, because I get to hear the inside of a lot of different companies right now, is that people are just saying, learn AI, go faster, be more productive. And then people are just totally overwhelmed
Yep.
and feeling really afraid of what the next couple of years can hold for their security. And so I think that it's just really easy to separate and divide and kind of characterize people in very broad stroke ways based on their titles that they play and like what parts of the company that they're in and the political orientation, all these things, right? So more than ever, easy to divide people, easy to like kind of operate in our like small little silos. And so I think that the role of creating environments that where people are surprised and really like open up a new level of, oh, I really see you now, like where they're dropping from a judging kind of stereotype lens to like a more heartfelt open feeling space where they can actually understand somebody's origin story and their why and their values and like how they became who they are. And it just creates a another level of understanding and empathy. And then when that happens within a couple people in a group setting, like the way that they operate with the group is very different as well. So like the level of conversation deepens, like the willingness to help one another in problems that they're facing increases. There's a lot of ways in which it just changes the culture and the feeling. And so as people are mostly communicating through Slack and email and Zoom calls, there's just a transactional nature that is the norm. But when there's a deeper level of trust and understanding, it just people are able to get a lot more done when they trust each other. And people are also willing to like give more nuance to what they need and want and what they're asking for. And it just changes the way that people work together completely. And when you it's very palpable when it's there. And it also is very palpable when it's not there.
Yeah. I don't know if this metaphor will work, and it's obviously an oversimplification, but I'm thinking back to when I watch young kids like we were when we played Little League or baby soccer leagues. You got whatever, 15 people, 15 kids on a pitch, and everyone's chasing the ball. Versus, I've been paying more attention to professional soccer leagues because my wife is an avid Barcelona fan. And just the quality of passing that comes as a result of people trusting each other, where there is not, it's such a dichotomous, right? Everyone's chasing the ball. All these little kids are running towards one place, running towards the other, versus the beauty of the most beautiful game where passing just looks like art.
Totally. Yeah. And I think this is so common in sports where you have, if everyone thinks that they're the MVP and is like operating in like, I'm the bomb, it's so different when then there's a sense of a we and a collective and like being part of something bigger that it's like when we all win, I win, as opposed to this I'm in it for myself. So it's a different paradigm. Yeah. But it's if there's like a toxic leadership from the top, it's very difficult to create that paradigm.
I saw a tweet a couple, maybe a week ago, that was like, so you want to be a founder over the last 10 years? And it was like, okay, there's Silicon Valley Bank, there's COVID, there's like
Yeah.
the acceleration of the 2018, 2019, there's the uncertainty of AI. It's like when I talked to my dad, who ran a 30-person environmental consulting firm through my whole childhood, he and his sister, the 90s was like a good time to be in business for yourself. And this
Hmm.
tweet was specifically about venture backed technology companies in the Bay Area. But you and I, both as business builders, as people running their own SMB, their own lifestyle business, if you will, it's not easier. It's not simpler, right? We are living in such complex times. So, as somebody who
Yeah.
talks to a lot of leaders and looks at the inner workings of a lot of complex companies facing these times, what have you learned for yourself about yourself as a leader building a business over the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about leadership a lot. I'm always also looking for leaders who I highly respect, who can be even like a North Star for me in this wild world. But one of the things I've come to realize about my style of leadership is very relational. So I have become very, very close friends with a majority of people who are part of my team. And that's a big value for me is that I understand and know them as human beings, and that we build a relationship over time. And I'd say a lot of my closest clients I would also consider friends. And some of them I've had a 10 or even 12-year relationship with, where every single time they shift to a new company, they'll bring me in. There's been a lot of, I'd say majority of my clients are recurring, and there is a strong relationship there. And that's a big value of like how I do business and how I engage with people is so important and almost just as important as the product that I am delivering. So I think really thoughtfully now around like the way that business is conducted and all of the small conversations and relationships and like the dance of it all as being a big part of being a business owner or being a leader. And so that's very different than, of course, if it's purely transactional and it's focused on out the only focus is money coming in as the main primary like driver of success, like it looks very different. And so I think when I build really strong relationships with people, when I give them money and I'm like paying people, it's a joy because I'm like I love you, I respect you, I like believe in you, and it's a totally different experience than if I'm like trying to just pay people as little as possible to get like the best output. So it's that's part of it, I think just like how do you run a business that's more focused on relationships instead of purely transactions, and that feels like significant in like the times that we're in.
I just had a podcast interview with Eric Ries, the author of The Lean Startup and now the new book, Incorruptible. And we were talking about iconic businesses that break the mold. Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia is certainly one of mine. Who are the business leaders, either personally or aspirationally, that you look up to?
One of them is Keith Yamashita, who is the founder of SY Partners. He recently stepped down after running it for over 25 years, maybe 30 years, and now just founded something called I think it's called the Center for the Moral Imagination, something
Hmm.
like that. It's a very cool title. But Keith is somebody who he focuses a lot on creativity and doing things differently and has an army of people who love him and is an inspiration in many ways as just being like a creative through and through, but then also just being an extremely savvy like business leader. Another one that I think of is Nick Mehta, who is the CEO of Gainsight. Nick also recently stepped down as CEO and passed the baton. But Nick, like I think more than any other leader I've ever met and worked with, people are just raving fans of him. They just adore him. Everyone that I've met within the ecosystem of his business and all of their partners and clients, they love him. And his focus around human connection, play, and creativity, which are big values of mine, were present in all of their conferences and all of their kind of client engagements. They would host these amazing conferences for their top clients, and they would just go all out, creating amazing
Hmm.
experiences, great food, cool venue. And so that was partly how I actually came into working with Gate Insight, was leading Late Nite Art at what they called their CXO summit with their top 100 clients. And just seeing the way that they treated their clients and then created community within their clients, and the way they treated Nick, like it just was a good model for me around what's possible in a pretty large organization.
Cool. Super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
One other that I'll shout out just for myself, and he has a new book coming out in September, is Danny Mayer of Setting the Table and Union Square Hospitality Group and founder of Shake Shack. Just that idea, I think that you and I both share of service, and service in unexpected ways, right? Not just service in restaurants, but like how do we as business owners show up in service to our clients? I think is a really interesting question.
Yeah. Loved reading Unreasonable Hospitality and all the connection and the lineage of Danny. And
Yep. Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality, great book. So your primary audience, and correct me if this is inaccurate, is chief people officers, CHROs, the people function within larger organizations.
I'd say that's who gets late night art like on a core level. They realize like this is something that's extremely needed right now and just in general. But so that would be the primary. But we work with a lot of different, chief legal officer, chief marketing officer, CTOs, like people who are across the company, anyone who runs a team who is solving big problems, making big decisions, and needs to align and build trust with a group of people quickly. Like that's what's so interesting about the work that I do, is that we have worked in 27 countries, and we've worked in almost every industry, from working with law enforcement at the like within the US court system, Office of Probation, to working with the California Department of Public Health, Office of AIDS and HIV, working with scientists, lawyers, like politicians, government officials, as well as executives and corporate teams. So it's very interesting to use the same ingredients and do a similar type process with so many different types of people, and see what makes us human. What is the through line that with pretty much any group of people, regardless of age or perceived differences, that can actually bring people down to a level of connection and trust with each other. And I
Yeah.
think it can sound fluffy, but if you're in the room with 50 federal probation officers in Louisville, Kentucky, who just took off their firearm and it's 8 a.m. and they're like, I have no interest in listening to this guy from California talk to me about creativity. Like that's where it gets really real. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a tangent. I'll come back to where I was, but like, how have you built the confidence, or is it innate, to handle that, right? If you're in Louisville and you're with a bunch of, I don't know, federal marshals who've just taken off their guns, like, how do you hold the importance of what you do and in some ways the sacredness of what you do while also respecting their industry, which you presumably know not a lot about?
Yeah. I think about my mentor, Charlie Murphy, who passed away in 2016, who was an Ashoka fellow, and his life's work was starting this program that I was part of as a teenager, which is using the arts to help young people and adults connect across difference, and really transforming the education system, and how do we weave more creativity in the arts into the way we work with young people in our society. But he had such a sort of dead set confidence in the power of this work with any audience. And I watched him go into so many rooms. Like he was working with teachers in South Korea, he was working with um, in many, many different countries. And he just was, even the most resistant, skeptical people with their hoodies on or just like arms crossed, visually not on board with what he was doing, he would be able to open them up. And so by the end of a couple hours or a couple days, people would be singing and drawing and doing these things that you just never would ever have expected. So I realized that the power of a facilitator who believes in themselves and the work that they're doing and how much that can be a transformative force in changing people's minds. And I think it's incredibly powerful to watch people move from being a skeptic and like going through the trough of, I don't trust you, I don't believe you, to like coming out the other side and being a believer. And like that transformation, because a lot of people would think it's never possible, but I've watched it happen so many times now that I've built a certain level of confidence in getting my reps in and like knowing that it's what we do works really well, and it almost always lands in a very positive impact with the people in the room. So what I'm doing, I believe in it because I know that it's like it's it's not necessarily medicine, but it can be an antidote to loneliness, to disconnection, to perceived difference that separates people.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by cultural waves and the role that business of whatever size plays within waves. So the example I always use is Robin's Cafe in the Mission District thrived in large part because the Mission District in 2016 was on the rise. I got to build and sort of witness building in an environment where there were a lot of tailwinds, where I was being propelled or the cafe was being propelled by the culture that was evolving in that neighborhood at that time. You've been building in and around belonging and trust over 10 years that has seen the rise of the importance of company culture, particularly here in Silicon Valley, that's seen at least three different pendulum swings around diversity, equity, and inclusion, both towards, in a way, very strongly, the murder of George Floyd, for example, the movement for Black Lives, and then now the current administration in 2026, right? Very hard away from this idea of the importance of belonging. Um,
Now called the B word in some organizations.
is it really? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, I haven't heard that.
Like
Another
yeah.
another trend is HR technology, right? 10 years ago, there were a lot fewer. HR tech was just a nascent idea, and now it's a many trillion dollar industry. How do you think about the role, or maybe you don't, and that's fine too, because I think counterpunching is an interesting motive and method as well. But how do you think about the role of late night art within all of these related but different cultural momentums?
I think because I've gotten to work inside of so many different industries with people who are not, who are all sides of the political spectrum, who are, farmers and more in agriculture, to engineers and people who work in, you know, just a lot of different like niche parts of the workforce. So I don't feel like I'm not necessarily stuck, but I'm not just working in this like a liberal bubble of California. So I have some sense that what we what late night art is doing with groups of people is very it's relevant, and no matter what we call it, whether it's like under the umbrella of DEI or belonging, or it's part of like workplace employee well-being summit, or it's like specifically about like HR and people, and like this is for the people who really care about culture. Like it doesn't really matter like what kind of words we want to put on it. Like inside of, businesses are built by human beings. Each human being has their own incentives and desires. Everyone has a valid desire to be seen, heard, and understood. Like what we do is a beautiful way to help people like slow down, reflect, connect in small interpersonal ways that open up their heart and connect them with each other. And it just works. So it's no matter what the trends are, like humans are social beings, and we all like have this desire to connect with each other. And so making it easier for people to open that channel up is it's very joyful for me. I really love doing this work. And yeah, it works every single time. So I think it's not necessarily like foolproof, but there is something about the ingredients that I've created that when combined lead to this outcome every single time of people being able to drop the armor down. So I think even like in the administration that we're in right now, it's like the importance of melting down some of the perceived differences between people feels more important than ever, right? When people are like armor is up and people have lots of feelings about what's going on, and yet we still need to get things done and we can't do it alone.
One of our clients at Xander Media is the National Association of Summer Learning, which is the largest advocacy group in the US for summer learning experiences for kids. We've been working with them for 5 years or so. And in January, just a few months ago, we flew to Alabama to film for them with the Department of Education in the state of Alabama, which has actually seen enormous gains in their educational outcomes over the last couple of years. And it was really interesting because there was an NPR host on stage. There was, I'm remembering his first name, Richard, who wrote the book of Boys and Men. Richard Reeves was on stage. And folks from the Federal Department of Education were on stage from the current administration. And if you would to look at the list of attendees, it could sound, or the list of speakers, it could sound like very polarizing, right? But it's fun. I didn't know the backstory of your childhood. For me, it was a backpacking camp at 13 years old that really made a huge, profound difference in my life.
Yeah.
And many people have, if we're fortunate enough to have a summer learning experience that shaped your childhood or teenage years. It was fascinating to see this, as you said, melting pot come together of people from across political and other spectra talk about the importance of supporting summer learning for disadvantaged youth. In Alabama, in the middle of the winter, actually, there was an ice storm, so a lot of people were delayed. And there was so much forgiveness and joy in the connection. As you say, there's more in common than not, more often than not.
I love that. Yeah. I used to work for Outward Bound leading canoeing trips in Alabama for young men sent from the court system. And I am a huge believer in summer programs for youth based on my own experience, changed my life and set the chart for my whole entire career. But Charlie, as I mentioned, my mentor used to say, if we can get to the moon, every child on earth deserves to have a transformative learning experience that unlocks their spark. We should be able to make that happen.
You are just back from TED in Vancouver for the first time, where you were on stage, which is so exciting. Congratulations again. What did you see at the forefront of people exploring their thoughts in public? What did you learn about the state of the world at TED this year?
So I was a discovery session presenter, which meant I did an interactive program with a group of people, about 40 people at TED. So I wasn't on the main stage. Over 5 days, there was about 50 speakers, and the theme of this year's TED was all of us, which feels like a powerful theme to explore in this moment that we're in. There were two main threads. One was AI, drones, surveillance, the future of healthcare, these kind of like, how do we use technology to accelerate solving our big problems? And then the other side was human connection, building trust, building opportunities to connect and perceive like our similarities and commonalities, regardless of like where we stand. And it's just, of course, I'm part of like the human connection camp. Like that's always been my thing. Like I'm not like a Luddite, but I've never been like an early adopter. I'm like a pretty late adopter to most technology, I'd say. But it's very interesting to have them back to back, to have these like drone companies talking about revolutionizing like law enforcement and solving crimes right next to Malala talking about trying to create the opportunities for young women to have access to education across the world, and looking the camera in the face and talking about her experience as a girl and how the Taliban has taken control again, and like how does she stay optimistic when what you've been fighting your whole life is like kind of taken out from under you. So all that to say, I mean, in some ways, I think the themes of this year are probably similar, but it just feels like more and more tension around like the difference of the rise of AI and AI relationships and AI workforce versus like connecting to people on the train when strangers are sitting next to each other instead of being on your screen, which is honestly like one of my biggest takeaways from TED was like there was a professor who just talked about his research of strangers connecting with each other in public space and the positive impact of relating to people who you don't know, and how it pretty much almost always is a net positive. So his feeling was like, if you're in doubt and like your skepticism is getting in the way of you engaging with a stranger or someone, like do it anyway, basically, because it's just like we need more people to break that wall.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely we do. That was back to the cafe days, which again, 10 years ago now, but still there's a quality of human connection in the little moments. And those have become so rare. I'm recently married and we met online, but I hear from friends, men and women otherwise, just an appetite to be approached or to approach people on the street, and also a fear of doing so because we don't have practice.
Totally.
You recently moved to San Francisco. You were living just outside of San Francisco in the East Bay. What are you experiencing? I lived in San Francisco, but for a decade, and it was not quite a decade ago that I left. What are you experiencing on the ground in San Francisco, having just recently moved into sort of the heart of the AI boom and very rapidly changing culture that is San Francisco today?
Yes, I live in the Haight. I'm currently right outside of Golden Gate Park on the Panhandle. I am happy. I never, for whatever reason, was never attracted to move to San Francisco until now. And now I'm very happy to be here. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and just like a refreshed kind of vibe. I feel like that's happening right now. Part of it perhaps is Daniel Lurie as the mayor. Part of it is like this like huge influx of people that's coming into the city. But I just love seeing tons of people out on Golden Gate Park right outside my window, just like bikers and walkers everywhere. There's like a lot of vibrancy on the street. I think that it is trippy and interesting to be. I was doing a workout in this like Burning Man art complex in the Mission, and then I look like right next door, and there's 1,000 Waymos being serviced by one human, and there's something like very bizarre about this moment of just
Totally.
like some of the stuff that's going on that I'm not even really tapped into. But yeah, I just recently went to the release party for the AI doc that just came out about
Yep,
four
Tristan
weeks
Harris.
ago, and I think there's just a really interesting what Tristan and his collaborator Asa Raskin are calling the human movement and the anti-human AI movement. And there's like they are in some ways putting their just like creating a distinction of like how do we continue to invest in how humans are treating each other and not just go all in with the technology. But so being in San Francisco right now during this time feels like it's a wild moment in our history, and I'm very much part of this. How do we stay human and kind and genuine and use creativity in the arts as a way to connect with each other, which feels very, the word during one of my sessions 2 days ago, everyone kept saying was wholesome. And I
Hmm.
guess in some ways it is. And I think, I don't think of technology as wholesome. There is something that feels like really important about it. But I think just our need to be seen and connected and to like collaborate well together. There's a lot of there's a lot of things under the surface. So anyway, I think I'm happy to be on that kind of like side of the fence while still embracing AI and using tons of tools myself.
I was going to ask, not a Luddite, but also a self-proclaimed late adopter who's living in San Francisco at a more intense time, I think, in San Francisco has not happened in our lifetimes. What, how are you using AI in your work or in your life?
As many started with ChatGPT and then shifted over to Claude from a values perspective, and also just seems to be a better tool for what I do. Yeah, I use Fathom to record meetings, and I find the notes have been incredibly helpful for me because I'm constantly taking notes in life, and that's been really supportive. I think you and I both use Superhuman. Is
As
that
an
right?
email app? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Superhuman and Fathom and Claude have been the main ways that I'm just using information and AI tools. Yep. I think that's the majority of it. I'm sure there's more.
When you're using Claude, what are you using it for? How many times a day, or what's the context around which you're using LLMs?
Often it's synthesizing information. It's supporting taking like lots of different ideas and turning it into like one cohesive narrative for especially when I'm writing proposals. and I'm taking notes from multiple calls that I've had with clients and being able to synthesize all of that information into like three bulleted outcomes, things like that, I think are like a
Yep.
big use of how I'm using LLMs. It's like taking phone conversations and then figuring out like what is the most important way to follow up from this conversation? What is like the driving question that we really need to have as the next step for us? Yeah.
Yep. I think I would encourage you to update your residual self image as not a Luddite, but a late adopter, because the way you're describing your use of tools is up there with less than 2% of the human population's use of LLMs today. Just to give you a little context from what I've seen in terms of how many people in the world are not using LLMs yet, right? It feels like we're late living in the Bay Area and surrounded by literally people who work for OpenAI and Anthropic. My wife works for an AI company, and yet what you're describing and the tools, the ways you're describing using these tools is not behind most people.
Yeah, I'm not a Luddite. I embrace technology, but I do have this reluctance. Even studying art in college, for whatever reason, I never wanted to learn the Adobe Photoshop Illustrator programs. I wanted to do things by hand.
Sure.
I honestly regret that now because it would be very helpful for me. But I do have this quality of wanting to do the love of the imperfect line. I don't like perfectly straight lines, and I generally don't. I'm not a big fan of digital art in general. I like things that are hand done, and so I have that tension. And at the same time, yeah, I love the ways in which it's can be supporting my creative process instead of taking it over.
Yeah. Something that you do that I've always admired and encouraged you to continue doing. It's fun to see you post. So for folks who want to see your work in a small way, they can maybe follow you on LinkedIn or other social platforms, which we'll touch on at the end, of these illustrations and notes of speakers, right? So you'll go to Responsive Conference or TED or anywhere, and here's Esther Perel on stage, and you have a portrait of her and your notes from her session. And they're beautiful, they're done in the moment, they're seemingly mostly for you. And I can't think of a better way to absorb a talk that you're seeing than to reflect on it in artistic fashion. I write all over physical books. I love reading physical books. And even if Claude can summarize the book for me in 3 seconds, I would like to spend 6 hours reading a book. But my marginalia are a big part of how I digest the learnings of. I just finished the book about P.T. Barnum, Barnum, An American Life. And I'm going to value this copy because it's scrawled all over with my thoughts about his life and his era and the circus. Where should folks go to see some of your illustrations and work?
I just put a lot more of my drawings up on adamrosendahl.com/art. And yeah, as you mentioned, I call it illuminated notes. I love to draw people and capture their ideas and their thoughts through illustrations and quotes. And for me, it helps me retain information much better, even from TED. I tried to draw as many speakers as I could. And when I talk about the highlights of TED, I'm able to pull out my notes and give people a visual, like a really, it kind of like brings you right back to the moment to think about like the not just the information, but the feeling of the person who's speaking and what they represent. And so, yes, yeah, I did draw Esther Perel and a lot of other very Jill Bolte Taylor was another one that I loved meeting, who wrote the book My Stroke of Insight and Whole Brain Living.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was just so fun to draw her as she was leading a workshop and then to like reflect that back to her at the end with all my notes. And she just like the
You've
joy.
got so
It,
many beautiful pieces here. Carol Robin, who we both know of Leaders in Tech, David Kelly and Tom Kelly, Creative Confidence, our dear friend Jenny. I'll make sure that this gets linked to in the show notes, but these are some beautiful illustrations you have put together.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to honor someone who has put so much time into developing a talk or delivering a workshop is to capture the essence and the thesis of what they're saying and be able to draw them. And one, it's an easy thing to share. It's a lot more interesting than a photograph, but it also, I think it's very unique and people tend to feel very touched and seen when they see a drawing of themselves reflected. So even some of the most famous celebrities in the world, like when they see a picture of themselves that's been hand drawn in the moment, it like touches to a certain level of humanity.
I love books And I saw a post on social today, actually, this morning, that said we're going to get back to a place where authors write books physically by hand to show provenance. And I like blew my mind a little bit because the printing press has been around for a while now. But I think that there's value in writing by hand. I write a lot of my notes by hand because I retain information better that way, even though Claude and ChatGPT can generate those notes very efficiently through a single prompt. Other than going to late night art, what are ways that you would teach somebody listening or watching to practice creativity or retention or their own learning and to deepen their own learning, not by being a Luddite, but by supplementing technology with the hard work of doing real work? What kind of work would you recommend?
Yeah, people often talk about developing an art practice and drawing every day and having a sketchbook. And I think there's not that many people I think that will like actually take that information and do it. I think it's hard. It's
That's a
hard to
big
like
lift.
it's hard to
Yep.
self-motivate if you're going from zero. So I think that incorporating some visuals and colors into your notes is a very accessible way to bring a little bit more creativity into your daily practice. And so I often will buy as a present to people. There's a very lightweight watercolor kit. It's called Viviva or Vivivia watercolor sheets. And it's about 20 bucks. You can buy it on Amazon or on their website. And taking that and just like using some color in as you're taking notes on a call or you're taking notes in a conference or a workshop, it just brings so much life into what you're recording, and it generally makes me remember it better. It makes me more excited to share it with other people. It's a fun thing to share on social. It's a lot. It's a total win. So that's a very
Nice.
easy way. Yeah,
No.
I have lots of exercises that I like to teach my clients to start their business meetings. Another very simple one, honestly, is bringing more intentionality into the music that people play and
Nice.
encouraging them to play music, especially before Zoom meetings start. Just as people arrive, even if it's only 20 seconds as people are arriving, it just changes the tone of the entire meeting. And it's much appreciated by people who are going in back-to-back Zoom meetings where there's just a copy paste quality
Hmm.
to the whole drudgery of it all.
Let's dig into that just for a second. In the waiting room, or if we have more than two people on a Zoom call, like I'm thinking, apply this to me in my life. I'm taking lots of Zoom calls with lots of people, and you just have music playing as they come in.
Something I do with my colleagues, and we do it almost every meeting, is when we start the meeting, if you popped into the Zoom room, I have a song already that's playing. So as you pop in, like
Cool.
there's already like an energy. And then I would say something like, Robin, if you're up for it, like let's just like get out of our chairs right now. And I'm just gonna do a quick stretch, whatever feels good in my body, and just gonna invite you to follow me. And even if it feels ridiculous, like let's just go for it for a couple minutes.
Totally.
Are you up for it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just do a little stretch and then invite you to do it and I'll follow you. And it's so simple, but every single time I do it, I feel better.
Yep.
And people
100%.
always say, "Oh, so glad to like stretch and get up," and like, "Oh, the song is so great." So it changes the energy and the mood of the meeting in a big way.
Yep.
It's simple, but man, especially if you're doing five back-to-backs, thank God.
Yeah. 10. I'm like five. I can, yeah, five's an hour for better or for worse sometimes. Some other things that I'll recommend for deepening the creative practice of just simple note taking or retaining information. The book You Can Draw in 30 Days by Mark Kistler. I hadn't drawn until I revisited that book in, I don't know, 2015, 2016. Having pens or pencils that I really like to hold. Here I am off screen fiddling with a pen.
Gosh, me
This
too.
is this
Me
is
too.
a Sharpie pen, and I have them in a huge variety of different colors, like red, black. And then I also like specific mechanical pencils, right? And the more I have implements for writing with, the more I'm likely to use them. And to echo you, I haven't done watercolors, but I like different colors and am more likely to use them if I like what I'm holding.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just color makes us feel good. Just throwing color down anywhere on your notebook, it actually changes how we feel. That's a pretty simple way to just bring a little bit more creativity into your work.
Speaking of changing how we feel, this idea of getting up and stretching, super interesting and reminds me of how we reconnected 10 years ago after losing touch since middle
Yeah.
school. I spoke at and then was given ownership of BJ Fogg at Stanford's Design for Dance conference. And the premise, BJ, for folks who don't know, wrote the book Tiny Habits. He's the founder of the persuasive technology, now behavior change, behavior design lab at Stanford. And his lab in 2013 was studying Zumba specifically as a entry point, as a gateway drug, if you will, into fitness, where millions of people around the world do Zumba every week. But it becomes a way that they then start to get in shape and discover a love of movement and go to the gym and reduce healthcare costs ultimately. I ran the conference for several years, I think 2014 to 2016, something like that. And we were exploring the role of dance in all of these different environments where movement does not normally get incorporated. As somebody who had a professional physical career as a gymnast, as a circus performer, I worked with kids with special needs for about 8 years, doing kind of physical movement to help them learn. I ultimately concluded that trying to persuade people in the corporate environment and in work life to get up out of their chairs and start dancing every day was not a battle I wanted to fight. I like having my physical practices, but I also have my professional practices and they don't necessarily overlap. And so I ended up leaving behind the Design for Dance conference. But I don't know, how did you come to, I remember it was at Stanford, maybe in 2014 or so,
Yeah.
you showed up and I was like, oh, my goodness, this is Adam from middle school. How did you come to find Design for Dance?
Daniela Plattner, I
Okay.
believe, was leading an interactive exercise with one of the little lav mics, and she invited me. And then I think, I don't remember exactly how this went down, and it might have been different, but I was so excited to introduce Daniela and Jenny Sauerklein with each other.
Co-founder of Acro Yoga, now Conference for Conferences, are a
And
dear
I
friend of our both.
and I'm pretty sure that was the first time because Daniela was a friend of mine, and that was the first time that the two of them met, and the three of us ended up being part of a business mastermind and becoming really close friends and collaborators. So yeah, I believe Daniela was the one who brought us in.
Funny, very fun. You do a really good job of incorporating movement into everything you do. Anytime I see you facilitating, I see people moving, but into late night art at Responsive, for example, right? You get people up very naturally interacting with each other. And without the awkwardness that often comes of, okay, now we're going to stand up and go find a partner and, right, do something physical in a context where people are usually uncomfortable doing that.
Totally.
I love the suggestion of, okay, beginning of Zoom call, let's take 3 seconds and just move a little bit or play music, right? Music
Maybe
is such
maybe
a
like
great way to get people moving.
3 minutes, maybe not 3 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your own physical practice.
So, I mean, I had a personal training session this morning. I'm doing strength training with weights. This is my first time in my life that I've done that kind of where it's like you're doing the same exercises consistently and like just consistently building the weight. I do a lot of yoga. I go running. I live in Golden Gate Park, so I go on a walk every single morning pretty much in this little forest area. Hiking. Yeah, I don't consider myself like a serious athlete. Like I just like, but I do just love being in movement. And one of the TED Talks was saying how human beings right now are more sedentary than they've ever been
Ever
across all
before.
all
Yep.
history. And after tons of research, the best thing that we could do for our bodies is every hour we actually get up for five. I think it was at least 5 minutes per hour, but I think there was actually like 30 minutes. They realized they were like, that's kind of impossible for most people to be like 30 minutes of movement for every 1 hour of sitting. So they were just they were suggesting that 1 minute of movement or motion for every 30 minutes of sitting. So basically like make sure that every 30 minutes people are getting up, going to the bathroom, go wash the dishes, do something where you're sort of moving your body. I think it's just like the consistently elongated periods of sitting that are literally killing people.
Yep.
So yeah, that's rough because meanwhile, we just watched that talk and everyone clapped, and then we sat for 6 hours to watch 6 hours of sitting to watch TED Talks for 5 days in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem that has yet to be resolved in our current world. Any
Meanwhile, I'm
other
like, let me move my little standing desk.
Any other invitations for folks listening and watching? Anything that you, I don't know, advise your clients, for example? I love these tactics of getting a watercolor set or taking notes by hand or going for a walk. But any other advice for folks listening and watching right now?
I think that it's such an important mindset shift to move from I'm good at drawing, I'm good at these things to just exploring how to enjoy the process of it. So, Your Brain on Art was such a wonderful book because by Ivy Ross and Susan Magsamen, because they have all the research basically around creativity in the arts and basically doing any kind of art making practice is or is they compared it to physical exercise, drinking water, and eating food. The creation of art is part of our well-being, like the circle of our well-being, and just figuring out any way that is accessible for people to do that on a daily basis or just in a consistent way in their life. And so for people just to find what are the modalities that work for them. So for me, it's sketching and drawing and weaving that into my notes. But I think for other people, it's just that book was really powerful in just having all the science of like how it actually elongates our life and our well-being and our mental health. So I think that's just a good place to start for anybody that's, I don't know if I have time for this.
Nice. Yeah. Any other book recommendations besides Your Brain on Art?
I just, this is, yeah, so there's another book called Draw Your Feelings. And it was written by my friend Rukmini Podar. And it's a visual, it's a book that, you can draw inside the book as you're reading it. But the core of the practice is being able to really tap into our emotional state and turn those into visuals. And in some ways, it's like personalized art therapy that we can like use these drawing techniques to actually process what's going on without necessarily going to see a therapist. And it's a powerful concept, and the book has been translated into many, many languages, and it's a beautiful book.
For folks, where can they go to learn more about you and about Late Nite Art and to follow along?
Yes, of course. I mean, lateniteart.com, it's LateniteArt. That is the core website that encompasses the work that I do. And then I have a personal website, which is adamrosendahl.com. And at adamrosendahl.com, you could see all the artwork and the illuminated notes that I do. I'm a DJ and I go by DJ Adamame. And so I have my playlists and, suggestions for how you can bring more music into your life there. And then there's also a bit more about like the experiential speaking keynotes and things that I do.
Awesome.
Yeah. And
That's
then,
Adam Rosendahl.com.
yeah. And I'm a pretty active LinkedIn person. So, you know, LinkedIn and then Instagram as well.
Adam, it's so fun. It's been incredible to watch from the sidelines and to have you at Responsive over the years, to see the impact among attendees who come back to Responsive, who maybe hire Late Nite Art or talk about their experience with Late Nite Art last year. Thanks for the work you're doing in the world. Thanks for taking the time. It's such a pleasure.
What a great collaboration, Robin. Yeah, I think it's such a good fit with the vibe and the values of Responsive and how we've been able to work together on this. And it's always a joy every single year getting to come to Responsive. So I'm looking forward to September. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yep. September 23rd, 24th at the
I'll,
Oakland Museum.
I'll be there.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, Robin.